The law shades are on. The law shades are on because they are crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. And Alex SEO, if you're watching this later, I got him done the Master of Executions, all based in things. Because I know you'll probably watch this later. Because right now, you haven't got the Rona, but you feel like you have. So the law shades are on, because tonight we're calling out to the law masters. You have been warned. There are spoilers ahead. They are crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. How's the sound? Sound okay? In a way, I'm quite pleased that there's only about 30 of you here right now, because then I perhaps won't spoil so much, because I want to go where the law masters go. I want to go to deep waters because they're crucifying titans on the ultimate wall. Sounds good? Sounds good. And I want to talk about this book. I've been thinking about how to make the content about the book. How do I talk about it without spoiling it? How'd you do that? How? Who's read the book? Who could talk about it, or at least doesn't mind hearing about it when other people are talking about it? Well, let's ask. Let's ask the community and ask if there's anyone out there who wants to talk about it, because they're crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. What a line. Diane Abner is that if there is any one sentence that sums up the Siege of Terror, they are crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. It brings tears to my eyes. Oh. So, 30 plus people here. Oh, also to the people who are here and 1,000 or so that will join afterwards, because the last one I did got a couple of thousand views, and we talk about the mug. We're at mug count 13 now, which is a lucky number. So calling out to everyone, don't buy another mug. There are 13 of these in the world, like the 13th. There is more than 13 of the 13th. And lore, I put out a lore video today as well, combining all the stories of the 13th. So I'm in a lore frame of mind, thinking, how do I make a video about the End and the Death of Volume 1 when they're crucifying titans along the ultimate wall? Enjoyed the narrative roundup video today. Listen to the whole thing, painting my T-Sun. Thank you, Captain. My pleasure, Will Purvis. Winters, don't worry about spoilers. I've just got back from a party and probably won't remember what you spoiled tomorrow. Good, Sanguinary Guard. Nice to hear. Good to see you in the chat. As ever, Sanguinary Guard, you king of mods, you prince of crows, you Horus to my emperor, you war master to my, or my Erebus to my war master. I don't know which way. Thomas, terror is pulled into the warp because of these rituals. Sort of. See, we're spoiling, and if you're here, you're along for the ride, or you don't mind the spoilers. And if you're listening afterwards, spoilers in the title, massive spoilers. I don't think terror is pulled into the warp yet, Thomas. Terror is dipping in and out of the warp. Extant space is folding over itself in the way it did in the Dan Abnett book, Pariah. What was the second one? The first one, Beckwin. The second one, Pariah. I think the second one was Pariah. The first one might have been Pariah. But the second one, chat, back me up. What's the second book in the Beckwin trilogy, Ravna versus Ivanhorn? You have space folding in on itself, such as the Impossible City. And there's mentions of the Impossible City in the book, The End and the Death now. And the King in Yellow, riding beyond the veil. It's not necessarily slipping in and out of the warp, though it is slipping in and out of the warp. We forgot that it was just we thought for the longest time, and we were reminded again and again and again by the writers that this just wasn't a battle for mankind's physical presence in physical space. It was also a battle for mankind's soul. And that's what the Emperor is fighting for. That's what his... We're told why. Finally, we're told why. We're told why, and this is the reason why. all sentient species that become suitably powerful and alphas in the galaxy eventually create their own shadow in the warp. And for the last great species to hit, well, you had the first extermination and the Necrons, and that kind of doesn't count. But you do have the first war in heaven, and you do have the unleashing of the enslaver plague. So you do have a post-apocalyptic, prenatal, pre-warp victory over everything. So the Necrons had to go to their long sleep because basically most biological matter was wiped out, or at least most sentient biological matter was wiped out. And the Blackstone was keeping all of their stuff, and they were soulless and they weren't going anywhere. So let's go to sleep because there's nothing left to. There's nowhere for biotransference to go because we have no samples of biotransference to sample. There's nothing left. I got nothing left. And then we have the birth of Slanesh. And then we have whatever's coming next, that impossible being. Samus, the end and the death, or the Emperor, or Horus, the impossible being that we will create in our own heat, death. And the Emperor is trying to guide us through this psychic awakening. And it makes it very clear that the story started 30,000 years ago, and the Horus heresy is but one chapter, because the story goes on for at least 10,000 more years, and maybe. There were lines, there were passages, there were parts of the truth that Malcador could not see, and when entombed upon the throne, he wept at the brilliance of it. Dan Abnett has reminded us that it is not just a battle in the material plane. It is not just a battle for the siege of Terra. It is not just a battle for a galaxy in flames. It is a battle on a spiritual level, on a extra-dimensional level with the warp. And it's also a battle that has existed for tens of thousands of years and will continue because our species will die a suitably intelligent psycho. The Tau would get there in the end, it is suggested, even though they're mostly psychically inert. It'll happen to the apex thing. It's the reaction. It's the almost a... Since the warp was disturbed, since the warp was ripped, since the first war in heaven, it's almost a, not parasitic, but involuntary, muscular. It's part of reality. The warp is part of reality. Reality is part of the warp, and these edges rip and bleed and consume over each other, and it's a reaction, equal and opposite reaction, just as reality can do things with Blackstone, and the Emperor was trying to do things, whatever he was trying to do, to calm it all down. It riffs and sways and moves around, and that's why Terra has not sank into the warp. That's why it's sinking into that place and many, many other places. I have not bought a mug yet, says the Bobbins. Well, maybe you'd like to buy a mug this evening, the Bobbins. The Bob count is on 13. No, actually, I mentioned earlier in the chat, we're at 13. No one else buy another mug, because I like the number 13. I put up a lore video today about the 13th. Did you see it? Anyway, what are we talking about? It's in a warpish, wibbly-wobbly mode. It is evening to you, Traitoruskin. I think Winter's Ghost writes for Abnett. Jimmy Williams. That is the greatest compliment that anyone's ever given me, even if it's a joke, which clearly it is a joke. But even to be joked and poked at and put in the same thought experiment as Dan Abnett, the man who delivered us the line, "They are crucifying titans along the ultimate wall." That's great writing. That's great writing. That's great writing. How could you not want to talk about that? The birth of She Who Thirsts. Now that's a cheeky origin story. Oh yeah. Is the impossible being Tzeentch making a straightforward decision? Tzeentch is change and making changing decisions about change. And Tzeentch is If Nurgle is the process, is the warp and physical manifestation of entropy, things fall apart, the center cannot hold, then Tzeentch is the driving force at the other end of energy pushing outwards. So you have energy pushing outwards from the hearts of stars. The circle returns, and it's just change all the way down. It's chickens all the way down. Yeah, man. Tzeentch can't change my laziness. No. Nice, Darth Liz. Okay. So anyway, big rant. We have had a big rant at the beginning. I've already given away some massive spoilers, but I'm hoping with the big title that I put into the chat, and I'm hoping because I put on my Lore Shades of Doom, that there's one or two lore masters out there who wants to talk to me about The End and the Death, Volume 1, because it'd be great to talk to someone about it. But otherwise, poked and prodded by the curious, the optimistic, and those that don't care, and those that like poking. Hopefully you can poke some goodness out of me like that early rant there, because, God, I've got to get this out. Because they're crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. And the scale of that, the scope of that, the power of that. Thumbs and like, the smash button. Thank you, the Bobbins. Speaking of Dan Abner, where do I go if I'm getting bored with Gaunt's Ghosts? You keep going with Gaunt's Ghosts, because even if it isn't your bag, baby, Gaunt's Ghost keeps getting better. So some people I know don't like Gaunt's Ghosts, and they find Season 1 and Season 2 in places quite a slog. But obviously there's some places in those books which are good. Otherwise, if they were just a slog all the way through, they'd put them down. It doesn't catch people. It doesn't catch everyone, and not every media can catch everyone. But Season 3 is better. And Season 4 and when it gets good, towards the end, it gets good. It gets some of the best 40k immersion, character building, world building that you're gonna get in a video game, in a computer game, in an audible, in a book, in a battle report, in your imagination. And when Dan Abner is on fire, he is on fire. And the build up, if it's longer for you, will mean that when you do have that break the glass moment of revelation, be it on Garro, the Chaos World, when they're sent down like a dirty dozen, or be it when the Castus assault ram pierces the bubble at the docking field of Salvation's Reach, and it is 3 Space Marines in 1 Castus boarding ram going into 1 docking yard. But inside that 1 docking yard are dozens of ships and tens of thousands of people that are sucked out through the hole that the ram made into space in mere seconds. And the ram keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper, 30 feet, 40 feet, 500 feet, levels into the deck, and 3 Space Marines get out and start doing what Space Marines do, and they're the only Space Marines on the whole of this Salvation's Reach, this chaos shipyard, this chaos place where they keep relics beyond reckoning that goes back to the time of the heresy. Indeed, that's what Gaunt is in there for now. That's why the Space Marines have chosen to join them on this suicide mission, where they will surely die retrieving an artifact so powerful its time goes back to the time of the heresy. And you're in Salvation's Reach with humans, with las guns, and there's chaos cultists coming at you. And it's a suicide mission, and you've lived with some of these characters for 2, 3, 4 seasons, and you're there, and it's Dan Abner on fire. It is the best. You're in a spoilers chat about Warhammer lore fan fiction here. Why should you stick with Gaunt's Ghosts? Why should I? Where do I go if I'm getting bored of Gaunt's Ghosts? You keep going with Gaunt's Ghosts, because if you can't find the glory of Warhammer 40k lore in Gaunt's Ghosts, then we're not ever going to communicate, mate. You're going to come back in and you're going to ask me other pieces of advice, like where should I go for this, or what about this? Me and you ain't on the same level, dude. So coming back and asking me where you should go after you're bored with Gaunt's Ghosts, we're not. I can give you advice, but don't listen to me, because we're not talking. Because we're not vibrating at the same frequency, are we? Where are we? Just joined. Where are we about today? That's where about we are. Yes. Necropolis is the best sci-fi war book ever written. Is it? Good point. Audible or real books? Not sure what you're talking about. Space Marines joined Gaunt. I gotta stick with this. Were you the guy who said up the bottom? Speaking of Dan Abnett, random CD. Yes, you are. Space Marines joined Gaunt once. They draw him once in, like, it might be 15 books or 20. It's got to be about 20 books now. And it's the third one before the end. But yes. And it's Gaunt. And say it is 25 books in or 100 books in. But you're 100 books in to Clint Eastwood, to the T-1000, to Ellen Ripley. You're 100 books in following Sarah Connor. And Sarah Connor gets to meet a Space Marine. Come on now. It's peak 40k. And then you've got a couple of books after that. And he hits a home run as far as I'm concerned, like he is doing with the volume of the End and the Death, Volume 1. I cried when Corbeck died. Me too. The first time Corbeck died, man. Me too. Chapter Master Alvarez. It's buy mug. Don't buy mugs, sorry. We're on 13 mugs. No one get mugs. Have I sold mugs? I might have sold a mug. Yeah. That's... I cried. So when Lord of the Rings came out the first time, a year before the Two Towers came out, the special edition... Lord of the Rings came out, and then the special edition came out just before the Two Towers. So I got the special edition, smashed that, and then smashed it again just before going to see the Two Towers. So watch them as well. And then come the third movie, watch special edition Lord of the Rings, special edition the Two Towers, and did them both again back to back in the run up to Return of the King. Smashed Return of the King. It was like the two extended editions are like 8 hours, and then go to the cinema and then do the thing and hit the thing. And it was the late night showing. It was like, for me, 14, 15 hours of Lord of the Rings. And I cried from about, I don't know, halfway through the Siege of Minas Tirith to the end of the movie. Like, he pulled it off, man. Peter Jackson just wanted to bring Tolkien's book alive, and Tolkien's writing isn't the best writing. I've known, again, back to a number of people who, it doesn't matter what some people do to read Tolkien. He's so grandiose. He is writing it like a space opera, like the space opera it is. He's experimenting and rolling with language like a professor of literature at Oxford would. It's not the, I've read it a dozen odd times. But there's times in my life where I remember a particular time reading it again when I was a teenager. I can't remember. I think it was mid-teens. So, high on the puberty things. And I remember reading it once and not liking it. But then I read it again when I was at uni and loved it. And that's why I remember the time reading it and not liking it. Like, how could I have not liked this book? And that just goes to show how our moods and our hormones and our worlds and our beliefs and spiritualities and our ups and our downs and the amount of sugar or amount of gorgeous coffee that we have, the amount of interaction that we have with people talking about lore just changes it for us. Anyway, so Lord of the Rings, man. Yeah, if you're invested in, and if you're invested in epic and sci-fi, if you're invested in 40k, if you're an open person who's a dreamer, who loves creating things, and writing things, and painting things, and, we're not football hooligans. We're not people driving cars up and down the street at midnight. We're not Vikings off on distant quests to do what Vikings do, which mainly had to do with a lot of sex from that movie and beheading. Not movie, series. Vikings, another good series. We're the open ones. We're the artistic ones. We're the ones that said, 1 minute, let's explore. Let's see what's over there. Let's think about it this way. Look at it this way. Can I share this idea with you? We're the geeks and the dreamers, and we took over the world. The Jobses, the Musks, the Zuckerbergs. I mean, all of them, as far as the media tells me, are absolute arseholes, but they did take over the world, and who am I to judge a book by its media? You should never judge a book by its media. I barely know how to judge people when I'm close up to them. I'm not very good at people. I'm good at play. I'm good at open. I'm good at imagination. I'm good at bounce. I'm good at honesty and trust. I'm not good at people are complicated. I'm better with large crowds, I think. On a one-to-one level, I tend to exhaust people over time, which my wife certainly tells me, which is why I think one of the reasons why she's wildly uninterested in Warhammer 40k or anything to do with a hobby, because at least it's time where she doesn't get this. Like, here I am late at night with the law shades on, and they're crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. And I want to talk to someone about it. Where are the law masters? If I don't catch any law masters here this evening, then maybe I can catch one or two of you in the comments afterwards. What got it for you? What stirred it for you? At what point did you go, I think he's going to stick the landing? I mean, it might be a bit drawn out, but I don't think it is. I think he had so much to say, and I want it to last. It was 18 hours on Audible. I wouldn't have minded if it was 30, and he's got 3 times 30 to go. I want to, or at least when he's done, there are other people. There's the Chris Wrights, there's the ADBs, there's the Graham McNeils, there's all of them can do stories in the Siege of Terror. It lasted months. Let's have other nuggets, other little... I mean, yes, I did Garro as well, Knight Errant. A fitting send. This is massive spoilers, but that's what you're here for. You're going to get caught in a crossfire, but a fitting end to a fitting hero. I would have loved if they'd have done more. James Swallow. I mean, James Swallow created the man. So James Swallow could do whatever he wants to do with Garro. And Garro having his one-to-one with Mortarion at the end and not breaking. That's what James Swallow wanted to say. So I dig that. As a guy who likes cool shit, if Garro could have done a triple somersault backflip and took his kneecap off, and then there was a sniper over there, and it's aha, I got your moment, and he blows Mortarion's head off and teleports out of there, and he's still alive at the end. Loken and Garro high-fiving it on the battlefields at the end. Khan is magically reborn. Soul, the demon can't keep the soul. It comes back again because Khan is a G as well. And of course, put my bad boy Sharrokin in there. We ain't going nowhere without one of the guys that Lucius the Flawless Blade fears. Stick him in there. And Sevatar. Let's have an A-team posse of the G's, yo. Rocking it out. That's what I would do. That's what I would like to see in the Horus Heresy. That's what I've loved to see in the Garro story. Instead, we got this fitting send-off where Garro actually has some kind of resolution with his father, and there's a breadcrumb of something to come in 10,000 years' time. And 10,000 years. Well, I guess you can't get everything that you wanted, but yeah, I do like that idea. That would have been a good idea. I mean, Abaddon wouldn't be able to join the party. He can fuck right off. But Sol Tarvitz, Nathaniel Garro, Garviel Loken, a reunion. Not that Sol Tarvitz ever met Nathaniel Garro. Well, he did, but not on Isfahan. But that reunion, that would have been good to see. Where are we? We're talking about alcohol. Cool. Yes. Platt Yes, Platt, that is why we are here. They crucified Titans along the ultimate wall. The End and the Death Volume 1. Massive spoilers. They crucified Titans along the ultimate wall. I mean, it's such a simple line, but I would have never thought of putting those words together in that order before. I certainly never had anyone throw any idea like that at me before. And like some simple truths, it hits harder because of it. Every legend has their weakness. Achilles had his heel. Superman has kryptonite. And Huron has the space IRS. Sanguinary guard. Nice. So, I didn't know how to make a video talking about The End and the Death Volume 1. So instead I thought I'd come online and talk about The End and the Death Volume 1. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the comments in the comment section and reminding people that this is a big spoilers thing. I think I've spoiled the crap out of some stuff, and they're crucifying Titans along the ultimate wall. But how are we doing? Is there anyone else out there who wants to talk to me about it? Are there any law masters sat there with their law shades on, thinking, talking? I mean, are they going to say the Emperor wanted, or he unintentionally started, the Imperial cult? They're not going to outright say it, but it isn't implied at all that he wanted it. But the Imperial cult is a necessary outcome of a number of eventualities, if this happens and this happens and this is a better way to describe it. There are a number of possible outcomes, and if certain criteria are met, different outcomes become possible. And the criteria to meet the Imperial cult is a fallback action, is a rearguard action, such as asking Malcador to sit on the golden throne, which is not a throne. It's a fallback action. If shit goes down and things go wrong, and we've banned all other religions, but at the same time created a being and allowed him to, that could create and would create the Lectitio Divinitatis, and disseminate that amongst the Imperial citizens of the galaxy before stopping him, and after wiping out all other religions, the Emperor set the seeds. He cleared the fields. He cut down the trees and the bushes and every single other plant that grew on the fertile plain of religion. It was a barren wasteland, except it wasn't barren. He cut it all down and turned it to topsoil and left it and left it and left it as topsoil. And topsoil was sat there getting rained on, a bit of sunshine, loving it. But he has a seed, and the seed plants, and it is the only seed that can grow in that topsoil, and the seed is religion. And the book is written by the Einstein of religion. If Roberto Guilliman could write the Codex Astartes, and it is the Einstein of Sun Tzu's The Heart of War. If Fulgrim could create the greatest artistic Mona Lisa ever, if Dawn could build the most impregnable fortress, if each of them were built to exceed, then one of them exceeded in that notion too. Yeah. What were we talking about? So yeah, religion. So he cleared it and set the conditions in place for the Imperial cult to grow. Now, if the Emperor's other preconditions and other plans in his 30,000 year journey at that point, because the Horus Heresy is just one chapter in the journey. If other certain preconditions and other incidences occur and things and this and that and the other, he can stop the Imperial cult. He can stop that, just as he stopped Lorgar at a certain point. He could have revisited Lorgar and stopped that again. But if he couldn't revisit it or didn't want to revisit it, there is the fallback, which is cult, which is faith, and faith is power, and power is the emergence of the Dark King. Of the King of Death. The death of man. The suggestion being that is either Horus, the dark powers, the powers that animate him, or a version of him, or its stalemate, which it has been for 10,000 years. That is one of the Emperor's fallback plans, as he listed in the Outcast Dead. And then there's another fallback and come back at plan, which is faith. And the Dark King is the Emperor instead of the evil powers. And the god of death can eradicate the warp, or at least allow mankind to defeat the warp enough to placate it, to turn it once again into a calm, simple pond, as it has been on numerous epochs in its past. That is the ultimate goal. Luton's Emperor of Man series asked some very interesting questions. One of the things was that Big E wanted the worship and the throne in order to ascend. It actually makes quite a bit of sense. Yeah, so he wants the worship in order to ascend. He doesn't want the throne necessarily. No one wants to be strapped into that thing. And he certainly didn't want to be an emperor. But he has to manifest as he needs to be in that time. So he needed to be the emperor. And Dan Abbott has made it very clear that the emperor has been led many lives before, many millions of lives before, hundreds of thousands of lives before. And the emperor has been man, woman, other, has been king, saint, priest, preacher, rock star, architect, philosopher. He can be strong when he needs to be, an emperor when he needs to be, or meek when they need to inherit the earth. He has inhabited many forms and walked many paths. And in M30, he needed to wear the garb of an emperor. How would Primarchs, virtual demigods, one of which will be elevated to War Master, these creatures that take over a galaxy, how would they respond to anything but an emperor? How would a galaxy of billions and billions respond to anything but an emperor? As Horus says right at the start of the End of the Death, we made more peace than war. That was one of the great lines that Dan Abnett was like, slap. Here's a quick line for you. We made more peace than war. Here we are in the Horus Heresy, reading about all the terrible things that Horus did towards the end of the heresy and towards the Interrex and the worlds that didn't fall into compliance. And Horus and the Great Crusade made more peace than war. They were returning heroes after the age of strife. Thousands of planets, hundreds of explorative fleets picked up humans in abject terror and horror and misery. I mean, look at Angron and his world. Literally some of the worlds that were liberated by the Emperor of Mankind, and other civilizations that were just barely holding on and about to get overrun by the Orcs or the Eldar or the this or the that or each other. The bits that were left over at the end of the Crusade were the more stable humanoid and human empires that could withstand and were at the edge. It's also, you've got to remember that warp travel there'll be parts of the galaxy. It isn't a unifying spread out across the surface of the galaxy. There are primary warp routes, which means, for example, the passage from Terra to Macragge is unusually fast. Typically, you can get from Terra to Macragge in half the time that you can get to most other distant systems. There are stronger warp routes, there are weaker warp routes, so the spread across the galaxy isn't what you think. And we made more peace than war, said Horus. They made much, much more peace than war. And the humans that came in peace wanted, needed, had to have an emperor of mankind, had to have a liberator and demigod sons, because this was a fight for humanity's soul, for humanity's existence, existential existence, like the Necrons here before them and the Eldari, and to the next species that might come along, or to other species that we maybe came and went in the 60 million. This is a nice, interesting thought experiment. The 60 million years in between the great sleep of the Necrons and now, you've got how many millions of years of Eldar civilization? They could quantify that and say, well, actually, it was about 30 million years, because 30 million years is a very long time. You could, by the time they come crawling out of the webway and actually have something in the physical space to interact with, by the time the orcs come crawling out of the webway and they have actually something of physical space to interact with, perhaps other great species, there's no reason why evolution, because the universe the galaxy is a very big space made of many, many stars. There's no reason why other apex species have not flourished and died in the time that it took orcs and Eldar to get back on their feet, or in parts of the galaxy where those other species that we knew existed back then, along with the Jokero and the Hrud. There could have been other mass galactic extinctions. And the only one that we know to have survived one is the Eldari. Are there any lore masters out there? Any lore masters in the chat, because they are crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. What a line. Put you right there. Put me right there, man. We made more peace than war. Horus. Where are we? After Luton series, I started to doubt the Emperor. Is he a god from the warp? No. That's me saying no. Where are we? Is this his trial to show his loyalty? Millions died to feed him, yeah. But if millions didn't die to feed him, we'd all be dead. There would be no millions to feed him. That's what they're trying to say. There is obviously the slim possibility. I mean, I'm not sure even Alanius Pius, old all. I'm not even old all. Or Grammaticus, or the Word Bearer Witch. I'm not even sure they want to kill the Emperor yet, or what their role is. They're propelled along. Because in the universe of Warhammer 40k, time matters, patterns matter, the right words matter. Whether it happens on the 888th day of the siege, time stops. Things matter in the 40k universe, which explains why some witches, warlocks, librarians, priests can manipulate time or space in Warhammer 40k land by knowing how to say or do or play or summon in certain ways, because patterns matter in the world of Warhammer 40k. Just like the Emperor needed to be an emperor, because it is a battle for our very soul. Would they answer as well? What did the Emperor know the heresy would occur? I believe it is undoubtable at this time that the heresy knew that the Emperor foresaw that the heresy was a high probability. You've got to remember that when you get into probabilities and Farsight, the Eldar, Farsight, back before the Emperor and the Imperium of Man was a vast Xenos-hating space, the Emperor would have spent lots of time talking to Eldari before. I'm sure Eldrad knows him personally. So Farsight, Farseeing, you see, they describe time in lots of different ways, and they don't like using probabilities when they talk about Warhammer 40k, like it's equations, like, well, the Emperor foresaw that the heresy was about 88% probable. They don't like talking in those terms. They like talking in terms of time being a river. So it starts at a certain point and it ends at a certain point, and the starting point the starting point is the past and the ending point is the future. And it doesn't matter how far up or down the river you go, the starting point is the past and the ending point is the future. Because from wherever you are in whatever present you want to be, there is always a past and future. To think outside of those terms would be philosophically complex and beyond the point that I want to make right now. So, what the hell was I talking about? Past, present, future, 40k. So they don't like talking in terms of probabilities. They like talking in terms of time. And within the bounds of time, they like showing it as a river or as a flow or as an ocean or as a thing. And there are rocks, there are eddies, there are warps in that river, and you have some power to navigate the river. And if you're as powerful as the Emperor or other creatures, you can affect the very currents of the river itself. And you can avoid smashing into the rocks that are called the Horus Heresy. You can avoid getting eaten by that's the one thing he's very good at. I mean, a lot of people get eaten by demons all the time. Like all of the Thousand Suns chapter. And Angron and Lorgar. They all, well, not Lorgar and Fulgrim, they all got eaten by demons. But one thing that the Emperor can say, and Abaddon got eaten by 4 of them to a greater or lesser degree. And the Emperor, for all his uber power and his tasty treats, I mean, they'd love to get just a little bit of him with some ketchup, some cheese, get some of that Emperor juice in them. They'd love that, but they haven't been able to get any, They call him the anathema. They can't even touch that. You can't touch this. He's more than MC Hammer. He's MC Emperor, Poggers. Reaching out to the kids there with my slang. Where are we? The Eldar fear us and wish to help our race. Now the Emperor is imprisoned. Yes, that's true. Levels. The conversation with Ammon about the cliff face being his vision of the future, or the view across the bay changing with every ripple in the water. Love that description about his view of the future. Exactly. That's a perfect example of how they like to talk about the future in the Horus Heresy. They can see it, and there's a lot of water motifs. Chaos is represented well by water, I think. When you only know for sure when you get on the other side, says Ben. Exactly. Boom. Wow, Ben. Yes, exactly, Ben. I'm going to have to drop off now. Cheers for the stream, Winters, and catch you later. Thank you, Sangurigard, if you watch back at this. I've got your American on my sofa. Stranger knocking. Yo, baby! Stranger come knocking. And Wrath of Constantine. Yeah, I know I'm on a bit late, Wrath of Constantine. So for the rest of the internet and the people watching this after the event Wrath of Constantine has flown over from America. He's a member of the Deployment Zone TV community to today go to Warhammer World and meet Stranger Come Knocking, who's now in the chat, and play him. And now that American is on his sofa. And he did this last year as well, but I don't think he saw Stranger Come Knocking last year. No, he's sleeping. Shh, okay, but I'm telling everyone else, Stranger Come Knocking. And then tomorrow he's coming down here and I'm filming a battle report. So I really need to get my beauty sleep at some point. And I haven't written the list. He's bringing Tyranids. And I'm thinking of, I had an idea earlier, where's it gone? Necrons. I haven't done Tyranids versus Necrons for a long time. So I'm thinking of doing that. And then on Saturday or Sunday, after filming with me on the Friday, we're going to Weekend at Bernie's 3. And I was wondering, Stranger Come Knocking, pardon me for burping, how you got on and how is it he's sleeping. He's obviously a bit jet lagged, of course, because they're about 5 hours ahead or behind that, and it's late. It's like 3 or 4 in the morning for him now. And hopefully you've helped him ingest as much beer. He is American, which means I stopped before I said help him ingest as much beer as possible, because as a good British lad yourself, if you helped a weedy American child ingest as much beer as possible, they would explode. Because we all know that making love in a canoe and a beer and an American lager has one thing in common. They're both fucking close to water. So hopefully you gave him some beer. Cracking day. He's hyped to see you tomorrow, bro. Thank you, Stranger Come Knocking. I'm glad you had a cracking day too, because a day out in Warhammer World. I'm actually planning a day out in Warhammer World sometime with April with 4 of the original SEOs, because April 19th is my 50th birthday. I will be the big 50. So the plan is to go up somewhere around that time and go up there and then hang out in the hall and go through the gallery, beer in Bugman's, play a game, go back to or beer in Bugman's afterwards, go back to the hotel, die, wake up in the morning, full English, go back to the hall, play another game, and then lunch in Bugman's and then back home again. It cost about 100 quid, I reckon, because like 50, 60 quid in the hotel, plus the food and drinks and all, petrol. And it's an awesome weekend. We've done it dozens of times, and we're planning it in April. So I'm sure you had a cracking day. That's what tends to happen when Yanks have a pint. I know, they fall over, don't they? He'll be sick everywhere. Okay, don't give him too many. Happy birthday then for then, Winters. Thanks, R. Do they have a bar? A Warhammer World? Yeah, of course. So where does this book end? At what point of the siege does Volume 1 take us to? So The End and the Death, Volume 1. It starts pretty much after the Eternity Gate shuts, by under half of the way through. Abaddon has dropped his shields, and you find out why. And by the end of the book, the Emperor, Valdor, Sanguinius have been on the Vengeful Spirit for some time, and Rogaldorn may or may not be on the Vengeful Spirit, but he's lived for a century. And we don't know what's going on. They're not on the Vengeful Spirit. That's the point that they keep making throughout the book. It isn't a battle on the material plane. Well, it is. And it is also a battle in the warp. It's also a battle in time that has been going on for a very, very long time. And there's very many. And it's also a battle between realities. Realities are folding down. So in one sense, they teleport to the Vengeful Spirit. But in about 5 other senses, they really didn't. That's where it ends. Verdict on The End of the Death, 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10. Shall I buy the book or listen on Audible? Both. I've listened to it on Audible, and I gave it a day. I mean, I consumed it in 2, gave it a day to sit on, and started consuming it again. You guys, I put a Winter's 13th video up. All my lore that I mushed together in one long video, because honestly, one of the reasons for doing it is I like listening to that series as well about the 13th. I think it's some of the best work I've done. So I like to listen to it all the way through. I would have liked to have listened to it all the way through, but it wasn't available, so I've kind of done it for me. It's one of the many reasons for doing it. I've been thinking lore. Anyway, where are we? Strange Come Knocking Hobbies. I just got the bit where Malcador sits on the throne. So good. Love Horus. Confusion. Yeah, you see. So you get quite a bit of Malcador on the throne, and you get quite a bit explaining and into Horus's confusion, and Horus's confusion turns out to be a layer of Horus. There is another layer of Horus. But I love the fact that it took us back to a innocent Horus. It's playing with time, it's playing with space, it's playing with reality. I love that. Talking to Mercedes Ollerton. We've got Euphrates Keeler and Garro Loken from the first book in the end book. I mean, sure, it couldn't be a greatest hits with them all in the end book. And wouldn't it be great if Loken matches up with Garro and they get together with Sol Tarvitz, who's suddenly miraculously still alive, and they step into the throne room at the very end and help defend the Emperor, and it's their heroism that turns the whole timer. We're like, yay, we knew you got it in you, Garro, even though you're dead already. And it would be good if it was that, but we can dream as much as we want to, but at least we have Mercedes Ollerton and Loken in the last book, and Mercedes Ollerton in her prime, Loken doing what Loken does, the War Master himself, Horus, telling you why it had to be him, the best version of Horus. We got to see the best version of him again. The last time we saw the best version of Horus again was back in the first book, and we get to see the best version of Horus again at the start of the last book. Dan Abnett's a goddamn genius. Read it in a day. It's crazy. All Siege is terror books. I've read it along the audio book. Horus is right, though. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about right or wrong, Spaz Wars. Either you haven't read it all the way through, all the Horus Heresy, or you're interpreting different parts of it that I've interpreted. Because the book is quite clearly that we're quite clearly being shown that it's about the survival of the species. We are open to the idea that the Emperor and Malcador and this heat death of alpha species, such as the Eldar, through the convolution of the warp against this alpha species growing and growing and growing and growing, would obviously grow in its interaction with the warp as well through technology or whatever, but it would, because the warp is part of the material, well, part of the maximum, the whole universe, the maximal universe, the immaterium, the materium, the whole of space-time exists. How reality is and unreality is. There is a chance that they could be wrong, that their diagnosis is too extreme, or their diagnosis is so far into the future. Say the Emperor believes that this might happen in 10,000 years, then the Emperor has sacrifice literally trillions, quadrillions, trillions of trillions, a number so high that I cannot fathom what it might be, has literally sacrificed that number of people in 10,000 years in order to try the next phase of a plan that might kill them and liberate us. And at this point, at what cost? Will the Emperor become the Dark God, the Lord of Death? Does the Lord of Death mean creatures of faith that give themselves utterly unto him rule the earth? Or does it mean something locked into the pariah gene, the soulless? Something perhaps the Yellow King has been building in extant space, in overlapped space, in out of space, like the webway is out for 10,000 years. And maybe he hasn't been there for 10,000 years. Maybe the vision that Beckwin got was a vision of something that happened shortly after the heresy. Who knows? Mind you, it would have been... No, there was loads of pariahs. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. Armies of... Enough pariahs to defeat all of the warp, some of the warp, to enough pariahs to have a jolly good go of it and propel the narrative forward, the 40k narrative forward for the next generation, for the next 20 years, just as the Horus heresy has lifted the previous generation, the old bastards like myself for the previous 20 years. Now we've got this push, so there's just enough pariahs, or more than enough pariahs, to have a good fight back. Because let's face it, half the galaxy has been ripped in half, and the Silent King has been doing nothing because the Games Workshop writers don't know what to do with him. But the Silent King is the resurrection of the Necron equivalent of the Emperor of Mankind. The Silent King is a being who did once conquer a galaxy, something that the Emperor almost did, but didn't do. And defeated chaos, or at least achieved what the Emperor wants to achieve, which is his species cannot be chaosified, cannot be robbed into the warp, cannot be abused, sucked, destroyed by them. He made them chaos free. Blackstone, yes, they can be obliterated and things like that, but he had to scour the galaxy to do it, but he combined the galaxy and defeated chaos, or learned to live with the disease. His return, and you've got to remember that about 3/4 of the Necron dynasties, if you look at the on the front of drop microphone, if you look on the front of all the old codexes where they show the maps of the galaxy, and so you find out where the Tau are, they're down there, where Terror is, it's over here, Isfahan is a fucking million miles away from everyone, that's why it was there. And you look at the Necron dynasties and you realize that about 3/4 of them are all in Imperial Nihilus, the side where chaos is, and the Silent King is back. The return of the... It should have such a massive impact upon the forces of chaos as to have them reeling. And wouldn't that be cool if all of a sudden it's a third challenger has entered the building? It's a three-way fight. Yes, the Imperium are getting dicked on because Chapter Maris of Valrak and some of the has been pouring it on with his clickbaity stuff, and I've been lapping it up, Valrak. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. But when you're teasing all the lore stuff about the end, I don't want to know that stuff. But we're all fucked and it's all... I love that. I love that. Most of it anyway. It's going bad. They've ripped the galaxy in half. We've got the Arcs of Ohm and Vashtor, blah, blah, blah. The return of the Lion, of course, is going to help turn the tide. But what about a third challenger? What about all of a sudden Chaos having to look over their flank? And, of course, the impact that the Necrons would have on virtually all other species in the galaxy, with the exception, perhaps, of the Tau, because they're so small they might be overlooked, and the Leagues of Votan, because... they've got very good at hiding the galactic core. Make that a thing. Protect them. Let that race grow and stand out and stand apart from the other races in the Warhammer 40k canon in the way that you've allowed Tau and Necrons in a sense. I mean, Necron lore is definitely Necron lore now. You can let Votan be, okay, at least they have their fortresses. The dwarfs in the fortresses. The dwarfs in the caves, in the mountains that cannot be touched, and they're not dwarfs, and they're not caves, and they're not mountains, but the metaphor stands, the impenetrable bastions where all the mineral waste is, and the super heavy chemicals, and the super heavy elements, and they've got all the gear, and they have, but they're not they're not interested in the way that we are. They were bred to survive, bred to produce, and bred to survive. And then whether they go on quests and whether they go spirit questing across the outback, or whether they become a mercenary or become it's up to them. They've got their own fights down there. One of the things they shouldn't have taken away from the Leagues of Votan was the threat of chaos, though. Because there's got to be, mind you, maybe they should have, because again it gives the idea of them impervious in their castle, which is how we want the metaphoric sci-fi space dwarfs to be. So they're impenetrable in their castle. Just a different way of thinking. Where are we? Dickie, the more I attend these streams, the more I realise I know absolutely fucking nothing about 40k, really. I think I'm in the wrong place. Well, if you're enjoying the stream, Dickie, and you don't mind listening to me, because this is why we're here to talk. As long as you're enjoying the stream. Drop microphones don't count, thank you. No, spoilers were okay here. If people are... What's this? Ben, sorry, Kelto. Spoilers were okay. Spoilers are okay here. Spoilers are okay here. This is a massive spoilers thing. Either you don't mind spoilers, or you don't mind getting caught in the crossfire of spoilers, or... I want to talk to some lore masters if they turn up about the end of the death. I've been poked a little bit so far and rambled a little bit so far because they're crucifying titans along the ultimate wall. And who couldn't want to speak when such momentous things are happening? It's all good till Varak has to read the Iron Cage. Yeah, so the idea that the Emperor, Ben, you mentioned, the Emperor might return to fight the old gods for the soul of the galaxy. I think this is one of the fallback options. There's plans, there's the river option, the river metaphor, the ocean metaphor, the idea that time is moving here, but you can navigate on the surface of the river, and powerful beings can navigate through the river and avoid rocks, avoid shallows, avoid the big drop, the fall, and some parts of the river. But you're a powerful, powerful being in that river if you want to. And if it comes to pass after tides and floods and monsoon and rocks, if it comes to pass that the form that you need to take in order to save your species is that of a god, in order to fight the other gods, to reduce their power somewhat, and to give your people something to believe in, and a faith that begets devilry, a faith that has its own potency, a faith... I mean, Luton says it draws from the warp. All power must draw from the warp. But no, I don't see it as that way. Because the warp can react. It's not a case of pulling from the warp all the time. The warp reacts to pariahs. And pariahs are doing fuck all with the warp. Pariahs are existing and destroying the warp just by... they hate it. I mean, normal human beings, it can drive us sick, ill, headaches, migraines, throw up, some even run away, some faint at the sight of a pariah. There are many layers in between fainting at the sight of the pariah and just banishing and stopping warp sight of the Thousand Suns battle psyker dead. There's a long line between that and all the way up to affecting the warp. And I believe that the sisters don't draw from the warp. The sisters have an effect. And because they have an effect on the warp, and the warp is a convoluted space-time monstrosity that we can't comprehend, sometimes miracles do happen. And I don't think it's the sisters drawing on the warp to make it happen. I think it's the warp itself making it happen, because the warp is a psychoreactive substance in many ways. The reason why war and blood is such a powerful force within the warp is because war and blood, nature red in tooth and claws, has been the way living creatures have survived across the galaxy for billions of years. And entropy, Nurgle, death is real, and change. Evolution, explosion, possibility is always real. If these things were not real, we could not be here. And then when thinking beings are born, eventually thinking beings think what's next. Non-thinking beings don't think what's next, what's more, what's there, what's further, what's faster, what's harder. And that kills them. And it's done it before, and it will do it to us now. And that's the reminder, that's the echo coming out of the end and the death and the Emperor's vision to stop that happening. And the only possible way you can countenance that in a meaningful way at that level, I think, is to suggest that the Emperor might have been wrong, in the sense that you don't need to provoke. I was going to say you don't need to provoke chaos, but you don't need to provoke. The Eldar didn't provoke chaos, and as far as we're aware, there weren't Eldar. The Eldar law doesn't see chaos in the same way that there's no chaos cultists, Eldar cultists. There are no Eldar chaos legions. Please don't do this, Games Workshop, if anyone there is listening. They're revolted by it. So, not that he was wrong then, but what? Any ideas? But I don't know, it's hard to see. There's probably a line. Someone make a comment. There's a thought I've got there, but I haven't fully explored it, and I need to prod it a bit. But if he is a new god, we don't know what he wants. Gods don't want, gods are in the 40k universe. They be, they manifest. They're archetypes. They do what they does. Okay, so the End and the Death Volume 1 was awesome. I'm glad I popped on this evening and got to chat to a bunch of you. And you got to prod my memory, because essentially what I was here for, wearing the lore shades of doom, was hoping there were some lore masters out there, maybe Luton, maybe Voldemort, maybe Major Kill, maybe someone unknown, but who is a crown prince amongst us all and had some juice. But in the meantime, you'd certainly prodded me enough to get my own juices flowing, and I think we're still at 13 mugs. Awesome. I said at the beginning of the stream, no one buy a mug, because we're now at 13 mugs. 13 mugs. And this is the way the world ends.